Now, Patanjali, as I mentioned, has a brilliant system. It flows in just such harmonious ways, and there are levels to it which become really fascinating the deeper you go into it. And we've already talked about some of these in February with the Chitta Prasadanam practice, but there is a series of things to contemplate or things to focus on that relate to ways of assisting you in clarifying your consciousness. So what are those? Let's pull them up here. Let's see if I've got a list I can share. Well, anyway, they begin in chapter 1 of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali with Sutra 33. And again, that's the one that we're familiar with, which is the Chitta Prasadanam, where we focus on friendship towards happiness, compassion where there is sorrow, joy where there is virtue, and neutrality where there is non-virtue. So that's the first one. What's the next one? Or you can practice on feeling the exhalation and the retention of breath. So there's a focus on feeling the breath through pranayama. Or the next one, number 35. Or you can focus on a subtle experience. You can imagine what it would feel like to sense energy and life force within the body. Imagine it, feel it, hold your awareness there for just 12 breaths. Or, number 36, you can focus on a state which is free of sorrow and filled with inner radiance. It means that you can decide to sit down and wonder, what would it be like if I wasn't experiencing sorrow, if I was free of sorrow? And then however that impacted you, however it affected your body and your mind, that's what you meditate on. Or, number 37, you can contemplate the consciousness of someone else who is spiritually free. As I mentioned in the beginning of our meditation today, why is it that we acknowledge the guru lineage within our tradition? Well, yes, it's because it's out of respect for the service that they provided, dedicating their entire lives to making it possible for us to be here and to learn these important things. But on a deeper level, when you contemplate the lives or you think about a person, you tap into their state of consciousness. So whenever you think about your crazy friends, your anxious friends, your friends who are always depressed and negative and pessimistic, you are tapping into that. A part of you is going there. A part of you is flowing into that. And this is one of the reasons that we have to be very cautious about our satsang, who we spend time with, who we actually think about. Now, people who are hurting, who need compassion, you extend that. But the people that we surround ourselves with, that we think about, that impacts how we see the world. So in this Sutra 37, by considering the lives of those who've experienced freedom from attachment, we also learn to experience that. We'll go a little bit further because there's two more. There's Sutra 38, which says by contemplating dreams and deep sleep, essentially by learning to remain awake, clear, present, and to access that clarifies awareness. And then Patanjali in Sutra 39 says, well, you know what, if none of those work, or you can meditate on whatever you want. You can meditate on whatever you want. Now, I don't actually think that's what he's saying there, but it sounds like it when you get to the end. Oh, well, you can do these things or whatever you want. However, I do have a story to tell you, and many of you have heard me probably tell this story before. I used to have some of these devices that you hook up to yourself to manage your brain waves and to sense your heart rate variability and all these kinds of things. I thought it was neat. And when you do that, they recommend that what you do is you breathe in a certain way and you meditate on, or you focus on love or a deep sense of joy, or you think about someone that you love. Because when you think about someone that you love, that response comes up in your body as if you're near them. And I did that and it worked great. Immediately, heart rate variability, bam, right there. Immediately, the brain waves did exactly what they were supposed to do. But I got to thinking about that. And I'm somewhat of an experimenter. And I thought, well, you know what? I really like sword fighting. Uh, I wonder what would happen if I did the breathing and I thought about sword fighting. And I thought to myself, yeah, I also really like fantasy novels and The Lord of the Rings and things like that. I really enjoy it. So I thought to myself, well, what would happen if I hooked myself up to all these gadgets and I did the breathing and I imagined that I was with Aragorn in The Lord of the Rings and I had my sword and I was just murdering orcs, the bad guys. I was tearing through them with my sword fighting skills. Not that I really have sword fighting skills, but my imagination of what it felt like, the adrenaline and the feeling. And what was funny was almost as quickly, and might even been a little bit more quickly, I went into heart rate variability and my brain waves recognized that I was in a meditative state. So when I read this, it occurs to me, well, if you like something like sword fighting and you can really focus on it, it might also help you to regulate your impulses and so on. And they do say that there can be at least semi, hopefully, maybe fully enlightened asuras. And what are asuras? Those are the demonic forms, the beings that are interested in worldly things. Well, they can have knowledge too. So if they're really interested in what they're doing, then they might be able to experience a clear state. But anyway, let's get back to this list and why this list is actually pretty beautiful in regards to how it can help you access dhyana and to meditate better. I don't know if you noticed this, and it probably would have been more helpful if I had like a image of this list that I could show you. But if you pay attention to the order that Patanjali gives for this list of points of focus, it's set up perfectly. When someone can't meditate well, let's say they're a beginner, what's usually getting in their way? All right. What is usually getting in your way? If you remember way back when you started meditating, what caused you problems? You were probably thinking about how you're unhappy. You were probably thinking about yourself or someone else who was suffering. You were probably thinking about how angry you were that people in the world weren't virtuous or doing what you thought was important. Or maybe you were just all caught up in the negativity around you. That's usually what prevents most people from meditating well. So what's the first one in this list? The first one beginning with 33 is, well, here's your problem. So what do? You meditate on friendship towards things that make you happy and when you see happiness in others. You meditate on compassion for suffering for yourself and for others. You feel a sense of joy and virtue for those people who are doing good things in the world. And then you focus on neutrality for wicked things that you experience, difficult things that you experience. So at the very beginning, Patanjali knows your problems. And for the beginner, here's the first thing to focus on to help you meditate better. All right, so you do that. And eventually, yeah, you might still suffer a bit from envy and jealousy and being upset and pessimistic about all the suffering in the world. But because of your focus on this chitta prasadhanam, you can go a little bit deeper now. And so we look to the next stage that he lists, number 34 in this list. Well, what's that? Well, now that you've been able to let go of all of these distractions that are common to just normal people, everyone, you're a little less normal now because it's not bothering you so much. So now you have access to a deeper field. So once chitta prasadhanam has helped you to transcend the things that chitta prasadhanam is supposed to help you transcend, well, what's the next thing to focus on? Well, now you focus on your breath. You focus on the movement of the breath. you focus on feeling the exhalation. The breath comes back in, you feel the exhalation again. Patanjali says the next stage is breath regulation. And remember, pranayama isn't simply about feeling the physical movement of the air. Pranayama, in a way, it can mean control of breath, but it can also mean expansion of breath. But it's expansion of the prana, of the life force. And when you learn to follow the breath for 12 breaths, and it becomes accessible to you that you can hold your awareness on this movement of the breath, well, then you can begin to feel the energy that is causing the breath to move. That's very subtle, and that's way beyond what I want to talk about today, but some of you might understand what I mean. It's where you follow the breath so deeply that now you don't actually have to feel the physical breath. It's as though you can feel this energy within the body breathing itself. Like there's a movement within the body. And you learn to access that. But first, just focus on feeling the exhalation and then noticing the moment when the breath is still. Because after you exhale, there'll be a momentary pause when the breath is still. Feel that. Breathe in. Exhale. Follow the breath. It's as though, for me, it's like the breath is like a wave moving out into sea. It's as though I'm standing there on the shore and I'm just watching, feeling the breath flow out, and I can hear the roar of it. And the roar of it is just the movement of the sound through my nose and sinuses. And at the bottom, there's a pause. And I wait for it. I watch it. And then I inhale again. And I keep following that. So this is the next step. Once after 12 breaths, this becomes accessible to you. You can go a little bit deeper. Well, what's the next stage? And we've already kind of talked about it. The next stage in Sutra 35 is, or focusing on a sensory subtle experience. This can stabilize the mind. So after you get the breath, the physical breath, well, that's when you gain access to feeling the energy within the body. It can just feel like warmth, the movement of pulsations. It can be your imagination. It doesn't matter, as long as you can sink and feel deeply into this field of the body. But how do you get there? How do you get to accessing this field of subtle awareness? Well, first you had to do the chitta prasadhanam to get all the distractions out of your mind about people, places, and things. And then you had to actually focus on the cycle of breathing. And then eventually you've sunk so deeply into the cycle of breathing that all of a sudden you are aware, oh, wow, there's a field of movement here which is not dependent on the physical breath. Well, now you moved on to 35, sensory awareness of subtle things, subtle body awareness. And you do that for a while. And for a while, I mean, like years. Okay, so we're not talking about this works in the matter of months. If you were an isolated yogi and that's all you were doing was taking care of your body, going for nice hikes, not having to interact with the world very much, yeah, maybe you could pull this off in a quicker amount of time. But we're talking about householder yogis, which we all are. So now let's go beyond that even. What's next? Well, after you can feel the subtle sensory experience, what do you gain access to? You gain access to Sutra 136, a state which is free of sorrow and radiant with inner light. Do you see how this is going? I mean, do you see this pattern here? I'm looking over here because you're all on that screen, and I'm hoping you'll shake your head yes. Yeah. So there's a pattern here. And if you have questions, put them in the chat box, and we'll have time to talk about them before we finish up. There's a pattern here, and you're following it. You're going into it. And once you've gone beyond the breath, and now you don't care about your sorrows. You don't care about people who've behaved poorly. You've transcended that for the moment. You can feel deeply into the breath, and now you feel deeply into the body. When you are awake, and by awake, I mean you're not asleep. Your eyes you're not nodding off. You're not going into dreamland, but you are present with your body so much that you can feel a sense of energy movement. and you're relaxing into it, but you're staying upright, but you're relaxing deeply into it. Just relaxing more and more into the feeling. And if you've never done this, you might not know exactly what I'm talking about, but you can get it through practice. Well, you've heard me talk about seeing the inner light before, the radiance in the spiritual eye. When do you see that? You see that when you're fully internalized and yet almost completely relaxed. You've heard me talk about that before. So, of course, once you've mastered or at least developed the capacity for dhyana, 12 breaths, on this inner subtle sensory body awareness, well, of course, the next step is what? Experiencing freedom from sorrow and a radiant inner light. A radiant inner light. Now you can imagine there's a radiant inner light. You can remember what the sun is like and meditate on that, and that'll be very good for you too. But what I'm talking about is getting the experience by just following the steps. Not doing what some people do and push on their eyeballs and say, oh, yes, I see inner light. Well, yeah, that's inner light. But we're talking about having an authentic experience. And just like anything else, when you've been somewhere, you know how to get back there. Remember that. Now, I'm talking about before we had cell phones that told us take a left, take a right, go here and go there. When you do that, usually you don't remember how to get there. But if you've gotten somewhere on your own and you figured out, go down that road, take a right, go up this street, and so on, you know how to get there again. Well, the exact same thing is true with this step-by-step process. Once you first gain this experience of freedom from sorrow and inner light, you begin to contemplate it, and you have success, even if you can't repeat it exactly each time, deep down inside, you still know how you did it, and you can keep working towards it and stabilizing it. So we're not done yet. Sutra 37, or contemplation on the consciousness of one who is free from attachment. Once you're that internalized and you're that free from sorrow, and you can feel that capacity for light, you are going to very easily relate to your spiritual teachers. Meaning you're going to be able to understand their state of consciousness. In my experience, and again, I watched this with Roy as well. When Roy said something, I understood what he meant. He didn't have to describe it to me. When I talked to Roy, I didn't have to overly describe things, nor did he have to do that with me. I understood because I contemplated his state of consciousness. I experienced that capacity for freedom. Now, on the other hand, and sometimes this is difficult, and this happens in relationships between all kinds of people, not just spiritual teachers and students, but maybe you've had this experience before where you're talking to someone and it seems like it just went right over their head or off to the side. Like they obviously didn't hear what you said at all because they respond and you think, what? That's not what I was talking about. And then they talk to you and you completely miss what they're saying. And you can tell it's like there's an energy dynamic where you say something and it doesn't quite land. And then they say something and you think, what are they talking about? Are we on the same wavelength here? Sometimes that happens between when someone is learning from someone else, just like it happens in your romantic relationships and so on. But by going through the process of this, by contemplating the states of consciousness of enlightened beings, or people who are at least clearer than you are, you begin to understand them more. You begin to, when you read their books, it makes more sense to you. When they direct you in a certain way, you might not necessarily quite get what they're meaning, but it doesn't matter because you know you're on the same page. So you're willing to just go that way, to try it. You don't have a sense, you don't have like little sarcastic comments you want to throw out because you're kind of missing what they're saying. I've seen that happen. It's really, really funny. But anyway, after you've experienced that capacity for freedom from sorrow and that inner radiance, you gain access to that field of consciousness, which all authentic enlightenment teachers have access to. It's said that the Yoga Sutras itself was the emanation of Hiranyagarbha, which is the great golden field of knowledge of light, the great golden womb, and so on. So all spiritual teachers who are attuned to the authentic practice, they all have a connection to this, and you have a connection to it too. It's just you haven't lifted up all of the gates yet to let the water flow, but you're doing it. So then you begin to gain access to understand what the teachers of the tradition have to say, and you're not confused by it anymore. And eventually, Sutra 38, you begin to recognize that you exist in the dream state and even the deep sleep state. So anyway, what I'm trying to get at, and you might have to re-listen to this again once I finally release it, is that what Patanjali is sharing with us isn't just a random list of things for you to maybe meditate on. You can treat it that way, and it does work. Meaning, even if you haven't experienced freedom from sorrow and inner radiance, you can, and I've done this, contemplate, what does Ramana Maharshi know? What is his experience like? What did Roy Eugene Davis experience in deep meditation? What was it like to know Sri Yukteswar's processes? You can do that, and over a period of time, it will become clear to you. But what Patanjali is revealing to you is the step-by-step process of lift up this gate, let the water flow. Okay, walk over there, lift up this gate, let the water flow. And each gate, you gain access to the next one, right? So remember this. And then that final sutra, or by meditating on whatever object you like. Well, it is true, if you sat down and meditated on a frog and you just hold your awareness there as long as you could, well, you're experiencing one-pointedness, and that would benefit you immensely. So yes, you can try that. But the reason this comes at the end of all these other sutras is simply because once you have kind of walked through these supportive paths, well then, yes, you can meditate on whatever you like, and you're going to experience the light of it. So my sense is the real essence of Sutra 39 isn't just, like I said, meditate on a frog and develop one-pointedness. It's actually, once you've gone through these things, you can look at anything, meditate on it, and experience that clarity. So that's why it comes at the end of all of those things. Otherwise, it should have come at the beginning, right? Just meditate on whatever you want, and that develops the muscle of ekagrata, of one-pointedness. But it comes at the end, which means that it's after a series of stages. I'll go a little bit longer, and then we'll take some questions. All right. So how do you do this? Ultimately, there are two ways you can do it. You can do it the tedious way, or you can do it the engaging way. And you have to figure out, what do you need to do to become interested in your meditation practice? You have to find the reason that will make it such that when you sit down, it feels like you are doing something very important. It feels like you're doing something very important. And what is that for you? I don't know. For me, I've been reflecting on this a bit recently. For me, it's, I don't know how to describe it. It's like joining a sacred field. It's not really accurate, but it's the best I've got. And I've been working on a manual for Kriya Yoga representatives. More and more people seem to talk to me about, how can I set up a meditation group? How can I learn to share these things? And up until about this year, I've been kind of loose about the whole thing. And I've realized very recently that there needs to be some very specific guidelines. So I've been working on this manual, this workbook, and it's based on a lot of what I learned from Roy. There's a bit of expansion on it too, but I've been writing on sort of the importance of being part of the tradition. And that's a hard thing to talk about, because we have issues with religions and cults and, dogmas and these kinds of things. But my experience is that being part of the tradition means that you are part of the fabric of it. You are part of the flow of it. You are part of the energy of it. And there is a particular kind of quality to that energy. And this all began when I was in Ireland a year and a half ago. And I was at this monastery. It was an old ruins of a monastery. And as we were walking around those ruins, it was called Wicklow, I believe, I was just overcome with love and tears when I saw the gravestones of the monks who lived there. No one knew who they were. They didn't change the world with their radical teachings or anything, but they were part of a deep tradition of lives attuned to, a part of, committed to, flowing with something very holy, something very spiritual. And I felt that. And to me, like, that's really what it means to be part of a tradition. And you're part of it already just by practicing. So it has nothing to do with being a visible representative in any way. And then this came, it was stronger again when we were in May in California, and we went to Yogananda's hermitage, and we couldn't get inside, and we walked by it. And as we were walking around it, that same feeling overcame me that I had thinking about those monks and their lives. And it was a sense of Yogananda and a sense of like the dedication of his life and the power of his life, not power in the sense of dominion over the world, but power as in plugged into, connected to something much greater. And I've been contemplating these things. And for us to really grow from these meditations, we have to have a reason. So for me, I think about those monks, those long dead monks. I think about Yogananda. I think about Sri Yukteswar. And I realize that living current, that living spiritual current, even though their bodies aren't here, still exists. And so when I sit down to meditate, I take it real seriously. I'm not stressed out about it. I'm not beating myself up if I don't do a good job. I'm interested in it because I know that that is assisting the clarity of my capacity to access that reality, that current of devotion, that clarity. So that's why I read these things and I say, all right, this is why I am doing it. And then when I sit down and do it, I'm actively doing it. I'm not just trying and wandering off and thinking about this. If I do, I know immediately, nope, bring it back, Ryan. That's not where we're going today. And I treat it like, I've never had a dog. If I would try to train it. But if you're trying to train a puppy, you don't yell at the puppy, right? Nor do you ignore it. You just consistently bring it back to what it's supposed to be doing, and you give it the little reward that it needs. Well, this is what we have to do, and we have to do it with love, and we have to do it with devotion. And if you can do that, then you can begin to review these stages of contemplation. Or your Kriya Pranayama is a great one. It falls under the category here of number 34. The mind is calmed by exhalation or retention of breath. And then your Jyoti Mudra practice, that's Sutra 36, contemplating a state free of sorrow and focusing on inner radiance. So it's in there as well. But if you can find that real sense of living devotion and connection, then all of this becomes a real joy. It becomes a living experience, like you're communicating with the greater aspects of yourself. So that is the key to making it enjoyable. The other part is just tedious, which means you don't know why you're doing it. Someone told you it was good for you. You hope it works, and you just force yourself to do it. So if that's where you are, that's fine. Just do that, because eventually the mind will become clearer. The chitta, the field of consciousness, will become stiller. And then you will actually start to catch glimpses of the things that are described here. And then it'll move from the tedious, I just have to do it because exercise is good for me, to, whoa, this is real. These things that I've heard about are accessible. They are there. They are available to us. We just have to go through the process, follow the map to get there. And this is the overall mechanics of meditation that we have to follow. Do it every day. Find the reason. Follow steps. Patanjali was very wise, extremely intelligent, mind-blowing. If you have access to guidance related to this whole process, just follow it. And it'll work for you. It'll work for you. Again, referring back to the class that we're doing with the Patreon group right now, the Kriya Yoga Online Patreon community. That's focused on the yamas and niyamas. And what we're doing is within that class, I described just very briefly how the chain works, how you go from one step to the next with the yamas and niyamas until eventually you just experience Ishvara Pranidhana. No force, no trying to overcome doubt and is God really real? Follow the steps. You'll see it for yourself. I'm doing these meditations now on the yamas and niyamas that help you embody the experience. So they're not philosophical wanderings. They're not journaling about it. It's learning to feel the resonance of truth, learning to feel the resonance of purity, learning to feel the resonance of harmlessness and love. That is following the same pattern, such that you gain access to higher realities naturally, organically, like a relationship that grows that you don't have to force. Have you ever been in a relationship that you had to force? You just keep trying, you keep missing each other. It doesn't really work. It's not that. We're not forcing anything. We're cultivating an experience where a relationship grows naturally with your inner being, and then it reveals itself to you. And when that happens, there's no more doubt. There's no more confusion. There might be moments of unknowing and mystery, but that's what it is. It's just unknowing and mystery, and it's beautiful in that. So we'll pause here. I really didn't plan to talk this long, but we'll pause here, and we'll take some time for about 20 minutes of questions. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Kriya Yoga Podcast. To learn more about Kriya Yoga meditation, you can visit us at kriyayogaonline.com, where you can find information about current book releases, online classes, and in-person retreats throughout the year. If you're interested in supporting this podcast, visit us at the Kriya Yoga Online Patreon community at patreon.com/Kriya Yoga.